Ever wish you could just sit down with like a business giant, someone who's built a huge global brand, and just pick their brain, you know? Not just the business stuff, but like, how do they talk? How do they get their ideas across?
Like some kind of communication masterclass.
Right, exactly. And well, today that's kind of what we're doing.
Sounds intriguing.
Our source material this time is this super interesting BBC Learning English video.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
It features Stelios Haji-Ioannou.
The founder of EasyJet.
Right. And he shares all these insights into speaking effectively, particularly in English as like an international language.
Which is obviously super relevant these days.
Totally.
And to help us unpack all this, we've got Richard Hallows. He's an English language expert, and he breaks down exactly what makes Stelios such a powerful communicator.
Yeah, so we're not just learning English here. This is about communication in general.
Absolutely. Communication skills are valuable no matter what language you're speaking.
For sure. Okay, so the video starts with Stelios talking about why he chose to build his airline in the UK, even though he's Greek.
Ah, yes. And his reason is really simple, but it kind of makes you stop and think. He basically says that English is the language of global business.
Makes sense.
He even says, definitely English must be the business language.
No.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, no mincing words there. But he's also built this massive empire, so maybe he's onto something.
Right. Maybe we should all be brushing up on our English skills.
Case one for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Okay. But it's not just about speaking the language, it's about speaking it well. And that's where Stelios really stands out.
Oh, absolutely. He has this incredibly clear speaking style. Even for non-native English speakers, it's easy to follow what he's saying.
And Richard Hallows actually points this out in the video. He says Stelios has this really interesting technique.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
He asks himself a question and then answers it.
It's like he's interviewing himself.
Exactly. And it's so effective.
It really is. Why do you think that is? I think it creates this natural flow. Like our brains are constantly asking questions, right? And then trying to find the answers. When Stelios does this, it's like he's tapping into that natural way our minds work.
He's anticipating our questions.
Exactly. And delivering the answers in this really clear and concise way. It makes you feel like you're part of the conversation.
Totally. It's way more engaging than just listening to someone talk at you.
Okay, so we've got English is key. And asking yourself questions is like a communication superpower.
2 great takeaways already. What else?
Well, Stelios has another trick up his sleeve. Seamless transitions.
That sounds technical.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's all about using phrases like, and another thing is, or, but in fact, to signal shifts in information. It's like you're putting up signposts in the conversation so people don't get lost.
Oh, I see. So you're guiding the listener through your thought process.
Exactly. And these little phrases keep the listener on track and help them to actually like digest the information more easily.
And the best part is they're so natural. It's not like you're forcing these phrases in. It just sounds like normal conversation.
Yeah, Hallows points out how Stelios uses them all the time. Like he'll say, Stelios speaks very fluently and de-organizes it very well.
Oh, I see. He's emphasizing the organization. It's another key element of his speaking style.
Exactly. And then there's, but in fact.
Okay, how does he see that one?
So in the video, he's talking about his commute, and he says, I came here by bus today, and I left my house very early. I thought it would take a long time, but in fact, it took me 20 minutes.
Uh-huh. It signals a shift in the story.
Right. It makes it more engaging.
I never realized how much these tiny phrases could actually impact communication.
Me neither. Okay, but what if we start using them all the time?
Yeah.
Won't we sound like we're trying too hard?
That's a good question, and I think it brings up an important point. Remember, Stelios is speaking in a very specific context here, a business interview, right? But these techniques, they can be applied in so many different situations. The key is to use these phrases naturally. Don't force them. Just weave them into your everyday conversations.
So it's about being strategic, not about sounding robotic.
Exactly. We're learning how to enhance our communication, becoming fluent in the language of clear speaking.
I love that. Okay, but speaking of fluency, Stelios actually has some surprising advice about something that people love to learn. Idioms.
Oh, really? Idioms? You'd think those would be key to sounding more natural, right?
You'd think so, but he actually cautions against using too many, especially with non-native speakers.
That's interesting. Why would he say that? Well, idioms, those colorful expressions, right? The ones that add a little spice to language. They can actually be a minefield for clear communication.
Yeah.
Especially across cultures.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
Think about it like idioms are kind of like inside jokes. They rely on this shared cultural understanding. You know, background knowledge.
So what might be hilarious to one person could be totally confusing to someone else.
Exactly. Or even offensive,
Oh, wow. Yeah, true.
especially in like a business setting.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Imagine you're trying to close a deal with an international client and you throw in some idiom like bite the bullet.
Oh my gosh.
They'd be thinking like, wait, what bullet? And why am I biting it?
Yeah, that could lead to some serious miscommunication.
Big time.
So it's not about avoiding idioms altogether.
Right.
It's about being mindful of your audience, I guess.
Absolutely. Using them strategically.
Like when you know they'll be understood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about striking that balance between, colorful language and crystal clear communication.
Right. And that kind of brings us back to what Stelios and Richard Hallows were saying.
The power of simplicity.
Yeah. So far, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
English as a global language, the question-answer technique, seamless transitions, and now using idioms with caution.
It's amazing how these little things can make such a big difference.
They really can.
And you know what I find fascinating?
What's that?
I think we tend to overcomplicate communication.
Yeah. How so?
We think we need to use all these fancy words
Right.
or like really complex
That
sentences
sounds smart.
to sound intelligent or persuasive. But actually, sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective one.
Less is more.
Exactly. By stripping away the jargon and focusing on clear and concise language, your message is actually more impactful.
That's so true. I think about some of the best speakers I've ever heard, and they all have that in common. It's not about showing off how many words you know. It's about getting your point across.
100%. And that brings us to Richard Hallows' key takeaways. He really urges us to become students of communication.
What does that mean?
He says we should actively listen to how skilled speakers structure their language.
Okay.
Pay attention to their transitions, their pauses, their use of emphasis.
So it's not just about the words themselves, it's about the delivery.
Right. It's about the whole package.
Yeah.
And he even recommends taking it a step further, like finding transcripts,
Transcripts of...
interviews, or speeches,
Okay.
so you can really break down the structure, see how they weave their ideas together.
That's a cool idea, like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how great communication works.
Exactly. It's like having a blueprint. But this makes me think, though, if we focus too much on structure and technique, do we risk losing our own unique voice?
That's a great question.
Like, we don't want to all sound the same, right?
Right.
And I think that's where finding your own balance comes in. Remember, these techniques are tools, not rules.
Okay, yeah.
The goal isn't to become a clone of Stelios or anyone else for that matter.
Right.
It's about taking inspiration from the experts.
And adapting it to your own style.
Yes, developing a communication style that feels authentic to you.
Okay, so it's about taking what works and making it your own.
Exactly. And that brings us to, I think, one of the most important takeaways from all of this. Anyone can become a more effective communicator. It's not about some innate talent.
Yeah, you don't have to be born with it.
It's about developing the skills,
And strategies.
just like Stelios did.
So this is actually really empowering. We all have the potential to improve how we communicate,
100%.
to be more clear, more confident, and more impactful.
And those skills, they'll serve you well in every aspect of your life. Personal relationships, professional success, the whole 9 yards.
This has been so insightful. I'm already thinking about all the ways I can apply these techniques. What about you? Have you ever tried any of these strategies?
I've always been fascinated by language. But I'll admit, I never really thought about the specific techniques that make someone like Stelios so effective.
Me neither.
It's given me a whole new perspective. I'm really intrigued by that idea of analyzing transcripts. I think we can start with some TED Talks.
Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe we could compare notes later. But for now, it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive and give our listeners a chance to reflect on everything we've talked about. We'll be back soon with our final thoughts.
Welcome back. We've been talking about speaking clearly and simply with Stelios Hagiaionu and Richard Hallows.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating.
Definitely. So how do we take all of this and make it actionable? What can our listeners actually do to improve their communication?
Well, one thing that really struck me is that both Stelios and Hallows emphasize that this isn't about some overnight transformation. It's about conscious effort.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's about paying attention to how you speak and making deliberate choices to improve.
So it's like anything else you want to get better at, you got to put in the work.
Right. And Hallows actually gives us a really good starting point. He says the key is to listen with intention.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
Next time you're listening to a good speaker,
Yeah.
whether it's a podcast or a presentation, or even just like a conversation, really pay attention to how they structure their thoughts.
So it's not just about like understanding the words they're saying.
No, it's about analyzing the delivery too.
Oh, I see.
The pauses, the transitions, all the subtle things that make their communication effective.
You'll start to pick up on those patterns.
Exactly. And then you can try to incorporate them into your own speaking.
It's like you become a detective of language.
Totally. You're uncovering those secrets of what makes communication so captivating.
You know, I used to think that some people are just natural communicators.
Right. Like they're born with it.
Yeah, exactly. But what we're learning here is it's a skill.
And like any skill, it can be learned.
So empowering, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're listening with intention. What else can we do?
Hello's also recommends finding transcripts,
Transcripts of.
interviews, or speeches by people you admire.
Okay, yeah.
That way you can really dissect their structure, see how they're using transitions, how they're emphasizing certain points.
It's like having a roadmap for effective communication.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try incorporating those techniques.
See what feels natural.
Right.
See what works for your audience.
Awesome. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a challenge. Become a student of communication.
Yes.
Pay attention to how you speak, analyze the techniques of people you admire, and don't be afraid to experiment.
Find what works best for you.
And remember the power to become a more clear, confident, and impactful communicator. It's all within your grasp. It's a journey, and we encourage you to embrace it.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you today.
This has been so much fun. We've gone way beyond simple language lessons here.
We have.
We've learned how to structure our communication for maximum impact.
And that's something to think about.
It is. So what about you? What techniques do you use to make your communication clear and engaging? Maybe it's time to analyze your own speaking style and see how you can level up. Thanks for joining us.